Yeah, I figured I'd touch upon Double Rainboom too. I'm gonna try to be at least somewhat short with it because I don't have all day and you probably don't either. So I watched Digibrony and Brony Curious's analysis on Double Rainboom, wherein they stated a very valid point, that Double Rainboom is getting a lot of flack for not being something it wasn't trying to be in the first place. That the animation, or at least chunks of it, would normally be lauded as great works of parody, but is instead getting scorned for not being an episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. They make a great point, and for that reason I'm not going to compare Double Rainboom with Friendship is Magic, and indeed I wouldn't doubt that some people are bashing Double Rainboom simply for not being a pony episode. But that's not the only reason. Things just aren't that cut and dry. A much bigger reason for this dissent lies within the story it tries to tell. This is where Double Rainboom fails spectacularly. I mean, there's nothing terribly wrong with the story when you summarize it. The problem lies with its execution. When telling a story, regardless if you want this story to be like Friendship is Magic or not, there's some things you generally want to avoid unless you want your story to be dull and or confusing. Such things include dragging things out far longer than they need to be, giving your audience completely irrelevant information, putting great focus on things, especially side stories, that ultimately have no effect on the main story you're trying to tell. This is probably the most notorious offense. Repetition. Having characters undergo drastic changes in personality without any explanation. Seriously, what? You know what? I take back what I said earlier. There is something wrong with this story when you summarize it. The Powerpuff Girls. Not the fact that they're there, but what they do and how they do it. This is what shocked me the most personally. The Powerpuff Girls in this show were absolute jerks. They were jerks to this monster who surrendered and were no longer willing to fight. They were jerks to Rainbow Dash, who they witnessed saved them from said monster and yet didn't give her an ounce of gratitude nor any respect as an individual. Even after Rainbow Dash set a fine example here seconds before. And they were jerks to this talking dog, which is really odd since at least Bubbles wasn't a jerk to him minutes ago. I see no legitimate reason for any of this behavior. Honestly, it's been quite some time since I watched the Powerpuff Girls show, but last time I checked, they weren't such incredible jerks. It seems like a terrible way to pay tribute to them if indeed that's what was trying to be done here. This would make a lot more sense if it was the rowdy rough boys we were dealing with, but even if I was to treat them if I didn't know them from somewhere else, such blatant antagonism from complete strangers to both me and Rainbow Dash deserves some semblance of an explanation. Why didn't Rainbow Dash question any of this? Why couldn't she ask, "Hey, why did you do that? He just surrendered. Is this how you repay some pony for saving you? Yes, I can talk. Would you just listen? I'm not some pony's pet. Who the hey are you guys?" I'd like to know that too, because these aren't the Powerpuff Girls I grew up with. One more thing, I don't see why Rainbow Dash is so afraid of them. They don't seem to pose much of a threat. Even if they could catch her, they got nothing to hold her down. I can't imagine Rainbow Dash not being able to simply shake them off. She should be at most annoyed rather than fearing for her life. I just can't have sympathy for her freaking out over a not really freak-outable situation. Then we hit the resolution, which feels largely unsatisfying. I believe it has a lot to do with the fact that Rainbow's lesson here, which was played straight and not for laughs, is astoundingly insincere. And that's probably because she gets away pretty much scot-free from a large portion of the consequences of her actions, i.e. the destroyed town. Furthermore, said consequences were not caused just because she took something that wasn't hers, but because she went on to do something completely reckless with it without once considering what all might happen if she did. In other words, she didn't think before she acted. That's the lesson she should be learning, as clearly emphasized here. This conclusion missed its own point entirely, thus making this whole ending a giant load of hogwash. Unfortunately, that's a pretty major failing. But Deft Funk, you irresistibly handsome devil! The making of Double Rainboom was no easy feat. Many people from around the world gathered together and poured their hearts and souls into creating this amazing piece of art, and it was completely voluntary too. We should be celebrating such a rare accomplishment. To that I say, it's the difference between pushing ourselves and pushing ourselves in the right direction. Man, I love that episode. Yes, it is an awesome accomplishment to have all these talented people combining their powers to work towards a common goal. It's a shame that that common goal was bringing to life such a shoddily constructed story. I find it weird. I remember a year ago I ran into another story written by Zachary Rich called The Ballad of Mecha Pinkie Pie. It was a very detailed and well-drawn comic, and I remember eagerly awaiting its updates. As far as I'm aware, he never finished the comic, so I can't really judge the ability to conclude a story, but the setup was great, it progressed with nice pace and logic, and it was filled with extras right where they should be. Why couldn't the Double Rainboom team be animating something like this? Then again, perhaps this is something better left in comic form, I don't know. Back to Double Rainboom. Yes, the animation was truly fantastic, as was the music. Alas, nothing's perfect. There were a few times where I felt like it was doing too much, and there were effects applied to both the visual and the audio that I felt simply didn't need to be there. Like a music video with too many effects, it would sometimes cross the fine line between dazzling and distracting. And yet, strangely, at other times, effects seem to be lacking a bit. But that's really the only notable complaint I have about that side of the production, and they are few, minor, and far between. And yeah, there were a lot of memes and references scattered throughout the place, and people apparently had fun pointing them out, but that's just not my thing. Unfortunately, for a number of people, when you have a story that fails, it can easily render everything else moot. So in conclusion, I congratulate the team for finally churning this out. It was definitely a great undertaking that won't soon be forgotten. I hope all parties involved do nothing but improve, but hopefully this video will help give a better understanding of why Double Rainboom just didn't appeal to some people. That's all I have. Good day to you.